Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a seriously fascinating voyage. I mean, we take thousands of breaths a day without even a second thought, right? But today, we're going to explore the incredibly dynamic inner workings of the human respiratory system to see exactly how it all happens. Let's get right into it.
So, think about this for a second. Have you ever actually wondered what a single breath of air experiences on its way down to your lungs? Because the outside air we breathe, it's not exactly perfectly tailored for our internal organs. Actually, it's often cold, it can be extremely dry, and honestly, it's almost always dirty, just packed with dust, microbes, and pollutants. Our body literally has to solve these problems in an instant, and it does so by sending that air through a series of highly distinct, microscopic landscapes.
Okay, let's dive into this first major landscape, the nasal cavity. Now, you might think of it as just one big empty space, but it's really not. It's anatomically divided into three very distinct functional zones. Right at the entrance, marked in green, we've got the vestibule. Moving further in, that large area highlighted in red is the respiratory region. And finally, tucked way up at the top in blue, we have the highly specialized olfactory region. Each of these zones boasts a completely different microscopic terrain, custom-built for a very specific job.
We're starting our journey just inside the nostrils, right in the nasal vestibule. Visually, this is a rugged, highly defensive cavern. When you look closely at this tissue sample, you'll see the vestibule is lined by keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. Basically, that's just tough, layered skin, super similar to the outside of your body. Notice those large hair follicles embedded in the tissue? They produce thick, coarse hairs called vibrissae. Combined with secretions from sebaceous glands, this rugged terrain acts as your body's ultimate first line of defense, physically snagging those large, dangerous dust particles before they can travel any deeper.
As the air moves past the vestibule and into the vast respiratory region, the landscape completely transforms to feature an absolute mouthful of a biological term, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Yeah, I know, that's a lot. Let's just drop the heavy jargon for a second. You can simply think of this as the mucociliary escalator. This tissue is basically a dynamic, continuous conveyor belt made up of mucus-producing cells and tiny sweeping hairs. It's an absolutely vital biological solution for both filtering the finer particles out of the air and beautifully moisturizing it along the way.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing that escalator up close. Look at those bright pink balloon-like structures near the top right. Those are the goblet cells, and they are busy. They're constantly pumping out sticky mucus to trap the fine dust and bacteria that somehow made it past your nose hairs. And right along the top edge, see that fuzzy pink border? Those are the cilia. They're microscopic hairs that beat rhythmically in one single direction, relentlessly sweeping that dirty mucus away from your lungs so it can be swallowed or coughed out. It's basically a microscopic cleaning crew that never sleeps.
But our nose doesn't just clean the air, right? It analyzes it too. As the air swirls up into the caudal or upper back part of the nasal cavity, the terrain abruptly shifts again to this, the olfactory epithelium. Now, while it looks somewhat similar to the respiratory tissue at first glance, it's actually missing the standard goblet cells. Instead, as we can see in this cross-section, it is absolutely packed with specialized olfactory receptor cells. These are actual sensory neurons. Odorants in the air bind to these receptors, instantly firing electrical signals straight up through the bone and directly into the olfactory bulb of your brain. That is exactly how we smell the world around us.
So, just within the nasal cavity alone, our single breath of air has already been through a remarkable gauntlet. To quickly summarize, the nose is a brilliant multi-tool. The vestibule acts as the bouncer, filtering out the heavy debris. The massive respiratory region acts as your body's climate control, warming, humidifying, and finally filtering the air. And the olfactory region? That's the sensory lab, giving us our sense of smell.
By the time the air leaves the nasal cavity, it's warm, it's wet, and it's clean. But now, our journey faces a major anatomical challenge. What happens when the dedicated path for the air we breathe suddenly has to share space with the path for the food and liquids we swallow? It's a logistical nightmare, right? Let's descend into the throat and see exactly how our biology handles this crazy collision. And now we arrive at the pharynx, the muscular tube that acts as this vital crossroads. Notice how it's divided into three distinct zones here. Up top in green, right behind the nasal cavity, we have the nasopharynx. Down below that, in yellow, sitting right behind the mouth, is the oropharynx. And further down in blue, just above the esophagus and voice box, is the hypopharynx, or laryngopharynx. Because these regions are handling totally different types of traffic, their microscopic lining has to be drastically different from one another.
Think about it like this. The upper zone, the nasopharynx, is strictly an air passage. Because it only ever deals with air, it maintains that delicate, mucus-sweeping respiratory epithelium we just saw in the nose. But as we move down into the oropharynx and laryngopharynx, the whole game changes. These lower regions have to handle both air and swallowed food. If they had those delicate sweeping hairs, a rough piece of, say, a potato chip would completely scrape them away. So to survive, the tissue violently shifts to non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. It's a tough, multi-layered protective barrier built to withstand constant mechanical friction. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Looking closely at the nasopharynx here, you can see the clear air passage at the top left. The tissue lining it is that delicate pseudostratified columnar epithelium. But look a little deeper into the pink tissue beneath it, the submucosa. Do you see those large clustered structures on the right side? Those are prominent mucus-secreting seromucus glands. They ensure this purely air-based pathway stays exceptionally moist and sticky, continually conditioning the air before it drops any further down. As our breath escapes the shared space of the pharynx, it plunges into the larynx, which you probably know better as your voice box. Look at this beautiful coronal section of its cartilaginous framework. The larynx is essentially the gatekeeper to the lungs, and it's divided into three parts: the supraglottis at the top, the glottis right in the middle where the vocal cords live, and the subglottis at the bottom leading to the windpipe. Its absolute primary job is keeping food out of the airway, but it also gives us the incredible, unique ability to speak. Let's zoom in and look really closely at the vocal cords themselves. So the crucial point here is comparing these two adjacent structures. Over on the left, we have the true vocal cords. Notice that dark pink band at the very top? That's our tough, stratified squamous epithelium. And importantly, the tissue right below it entirely lacks glands. Now glance over at the right image of the vestibular folds. Those are your false vocal cords. See those massive dark purple clusters? Those are the seromucus glands. So how does this microscopic anatomy actually affect your everyday life? Well, it's literally the secret to clear speech. Because the true vocal cords lack those bulky mucus glands, they are incredibly streamlined. This allows the vocalis muscle, which you can see as those large pink areas, to vibrate the true cords cleanly and crisply to produce sound. Meanwhile, those false cords sitting right above them act almost like an oil can. Their glands secrete mucus down onto the true cords, lubricating them so they don't dry out from all that rapid vibration. It is just a perfect structural partnership. Okay, so the air has been filtered, warmed, moisturized, and it successfully navigated the pretty treacherous crossing of the throat and vocal cords. Now it plunges down the windpipe. But our lungs are massive, taking up most of our chest cavity. So how does this single volume of air manage to distribute itself perfectly and evenly into millions of microscopic air sacs to deliver oxygen?
The answer lies in this absolutely astonishing number, 23. From the very moment air enters your trachea, or windpipe, the airway tubes divide and branch off roughly 23 separate times before finally reaching their destination at the alveoli. It is an incredible feat of biological engineering, taking a single tube and creating an absolutely massive surface area.
Let's move to and see how this builds out sequentially. It all starts with one large tube, the trachea. This splits into two primary bronchi, one heading to the right lung, one to the left. Next, those split into lobar bronchi. Since the right lung has 3 lobes and the left has 2, we get 3 lobar bronchi on the right and 2 on the left. Then it divides yet again into segmental bronchi, supplying the specific bronchopulmonary segments, usually about 10 on the right and 8 on the left. And this branching? It just keeps going, getting microscopically smaller with every single step. Ultimately, the breath's journey concludes in this beautifully intricate, fractal-like branching of the lungs. It really is an awe-inspiring crescendo to our journey today. Every single aspect of the anatomy we've looked at, the rugged nasal vestibule, the sweeping mucociliary escalator, the tough dividing tissues of the pharynx, and those intricate vocal cords, all of it works in perfect, seamless harmony. And it does all this just to ensure that by the time air reaches these final delicate branches, it is pure, warm, and perfectly conditioned to sustain your life. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. If every single breath we take relies on such an elaborate, highly protective, microscopic gauntlet functioning perfectly, what happens when we constantly bombard it? How might long-term exposure to harsh environmental pollutants or smoking alter or even destroy these highly specialized cellular landscapes over time? It's a really profound question about how our modern environment interacts with our ancient, beautifully adapted anatomy. Thank you so much for joining me on this fantastic voyage. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.